You don't need a perfect joke to get a reaction. In fact, the fastest way to make someone react is to tell a joke that's just bad enough to make them groan, not laugh, not clap, just groan because groaning is immediate, it's instinctive, it's automatic, and that's what makes it powerful. Now think about it. A good joke takes time, setup, timing, delivery, expectation, but a bad joke, it skips all of that. It goes straight to the reaction. And somehow that reaction is just as strong, sometimes even stronger. Now let's test this. Why don't skeletons fight each other? Because they don't have the guts. There it is. That reaction you just had, that slight pause, that internal resistance, that's the groan. And it happens instantly because your brain recognizes what just happened. A predictable setup, a simple twist, a punchline you saw coming, but still had to process. Now, here's the interesting part. Groan-worthy jokes work because they are simple, too simple. They don't challenge you, they don't surprise you, they just exist. And your brain reacts to that simplicity, not with laughter, but with discomfort. Now, let's go deeper. Your brain is wired to detect patterns. It wants novelty, it wants something unexpected. So when it hears a joke, it prepares for something clever, something surprising, but when the punchline is obvious, or overly simple, it creates a mismatch, expectation versus reality, and that mismatch creates the groan. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. That groan is still engagement, it's still a reaction. Which means the joke worked, just not in the way you expected. Now let's continue. What do you call fake spaghetti? An impasta. You didn't laugh, but you reacted, and that's the key. Groan jokes don't aim for laughter, they aim for recognition. The moment your brain says, I see what you did, even if it doesn't like it. Now, let's break this down further. There are three main ingredients to a groan-worthy joke. First, predictability. The setup feels familiar. Second, simplicity. The punchline is easy to understand. Third, inevitability. Once you hear the setup, you almost know what's coming, and when all three combine, the groan becomes unavoidable. Now, let's test another one. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field. There's that feeling again, not quite laughter, not quite annoyance, somewhere in between, and that space is where groan humor lives. Now, let's go deeper into psychology. Groan jokes work because they bypass complexity. They don't require deep thinking, they don't require context, they deliver meaning instantly, and instant meaning creates instant reaction. Now here's the twist. The more you hear these jokes, the weaker your resistance becomes. At first you reject them, you resist laughing, you try to stay serious, but over time, the repetition wears down that resistance, and suddenly, you find yourself reacting more than you expected. Now let's explore escalation, because the fastest way to make someone groan is not just one joke, it's a sequence. Each one slightly worse than the last, each one lowering the standard until the reaction becomes automatic. Let's try it. What do you call cheese that isn't yours? Nacho cheese. What did one wall say to the other wall? I'll meet you at the corner. Why don't eggs tell jokes? They might crack up. At this point, you're not even evaluating the jokes anymore. You're just reacting, and that's the goal. Now, let's talk about timing. Groan jokes work best when delivered quickly, no build-up, no delay, just setup, punchline. Because speed prevents overthinking, and overthinking reduces reaction, so the faster the joke lands, the faster the groan appears. Now let's shift perspective. Why do people keep listening to bad jokes, even when they know they're bad? Because there's a pattern, a rhythm, a curiosity. How bad can the next one be? And that curiosity keeps them engaged, even when they don't want to be. Now, let's go deeper into social behavior. Groaning is not just individual, it's collective. In a group setting, one person reacts, and others follow. Not because the joke is funny, but because the reaction spreads, and suddenly the entire group is engaged through shared discomfort. Now here's something important. Groan humor lowers expectations, and lowering expectations creates freedom. Because once people stop expecting brilliance, they become more open to reacting, and that makes the experience more interactive. Now, let's talk about control. The person telling the jokes controls the pace, controls the flow, controls the escalation, and with each joke, they pull the audience deeper into the pattern until the reaction becomes predictable. Now, let's simplify everything. The fastest way to make someone groan is say something simple, make it predictable, deliver it quickly, and repeat. Now, let's push this further because at a certain point, the groan becomes part of the entertainment. People expect it, they anticipate it, they even look forward to it, not because they enjoy the joke, but because they enjoy the reaction. Now, let's test one more sequence. Why did the bicycle fall over? Because it was too tired. What do you call a bear with no teeth? A gummy bear. Why did the math book look sad? Because it had too many problems. You're still here, and that proves something. These jokes work, not because they're good, but because they're effective. Now let's go deeper into why. Groan humor removes pressure. You don't need to laugh, you don't need to think, you just react. And reaction is easier than evaluation. Now let's talk about endurance. The longer the sequence goes, the stronger the effect becomes, because repetition builds rhythm, and rhythm builds expectation, and expectation builds reaction. Now, let's approach the final layer. Groan jokes create a shared experience, not based on humor, but on reaction. And shared reaction creates connection, even if the connection is based on something ridiculous. Now, let's bring everything together. The fastest way to make someone groan is not about being funny. It's about being immediate, predictable, relentless, and slightly annoying because annoyance triggers reaction, and reaction creates engagement. Now, let's end with the core idea. You don't need the perfect joke. You don't need cleverness. You don't need complexity. All you need is the right level of bad, because when a joke is just bad enough, it becomes unforgettable. Not because people loved it, but because they reacted to it, and sometimes that reaction is more powerful than laughter. Because a groan is instant, honest, and impossible to fake, and once you hear it, you know it worked.